Hey guys, welcome back. So getting back into Symbiote Spider-Man Alien Reality, to where once again your Symbiote Spider-Man series, it gives us a reimagining of your Symbiote Spider-Man saga that's been rehashed from your original creative team, but with doing so in a very new and super intriguing way. So for anyone just tuning in, just know that these stories of Symbiote Spider-Man are loosely based on an untrue story. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping right back in to where Peter is met with the arrival of Doctor Strange, and with doing so, we come to find out that Doctor Strange also still has his memories from the previous reality. And though he doesn't have the use of the Sanctum Sanctorum and many of the mystical trinkets which reside therein, he's still able to pull off a few tricks, like for example making Peter invisible in order to get away from the Hobgoblin. But after this, when they go to grab a bite to eat, Doctor Strange begins to give Peter a bit more detail about how things have gotten so crazy. And of course, when Doctor Strange starts off telling Peter about the book called the Word of God, immediately Peter was like, oh yeah, I was reading about some Christian community in Michigan. And immediately Peter's like, wait a minute, they did all this? And of course Strange tells him no, not at all, that's not what we're talking about here. But as it turns out, when this began, Strange was met with a visitor at the Sanctum Sanctorum who had claimed to be a reporter for the Daily Bugle. And though his visitation was unrelated to the event we had seen taking place years ago in Siberia, we do see that this visitation happened after that. But on top of this, for whatever reason, this guy who claimed to be a reporter, he knew exactly where to go to find the Word of God. And in the case of him just walking in the Sanctum Sanctorum and getting to it, this would have been much more different if he was another sorcerer trying to use magic or obvious threat trying to break in. Because in those situations, Strange has precautions set in place to keep your random thief out or even neutralize other spells that try to create another form of entry. But on top of that, this is also why as soon as the visitor had touched the book, immediately Strange knew that something was wrong. But at this point, with the visitor getting his hands on it, Strange was too late. The visitor was able to make his way out, and just before he made his exit, he sent an army of the mindless ones to distract Doctor Strange so he can make his way out. But during that brief time before Strange had made his way out, he was able to grab a couple things like the Ring of Zona, which is what he used to make Peter invisible, but with doing so, he was only able to grab a handful of items, which overall pale in comparison to what he had as Sorcerer Supreme. But even in the case of Doctor Strange, like his greatest weapon has never so much been the amount of power that he's had, and even when that power was through the roof, but yet and still his greatest weapon has always been his innovation and his imagination and how he applies it to whatever profession, whether it was as a neurosurgeon or a Sorcerer Supreme. And really for that reason we know like whatever Strange has his hands on that he'll be able to make the most out of it. But at this point Peter then asks him like, if these dudes have this book that can just change all of reality, like why didn't they just wipe them out of existence? Which Strange recognizes that is for the obvious reason that whoever these guys are, that much for the same reason that Hobgoblin had mentioned, they want the two of them to witness and remember their own destruction. And as a solution for this, Doctor Strange then tells Spider-Man that he wants him to learn the mystic arts so that they can face these sorcerers together. And with hearing this, like immediately Peter's like, look, that's completely out of my wheelhouse, not my thing. But also with this, Strange makes the very valid point that before he became Sorcerer Supreme, the mystic arts wasn't necessarily his thing either. And on top of that, because in this moment Peter at least believes in magic, he's already much further ahead than where Strange was when he began. And like with hearing this, Peter's kind of on the fence about the idea, and because of that he lets Strange know that he has to go check on someone, and when he gets back they'll kind of pick up where they left off. And when Peter says this, he just goes, and like Strange is standing there kind of talking to himself, just kind of like, well, okay, I'll be here. I have nowhere else to go. I'm Dr. Homeless. This isn't a first. But at this point, when we get to see who Peter went to go check on, of course, it's his Aunt May. And at this point, when he calls May, she has no recollection of being upset with Peter like we'd seen in the first Symbiote Spider-Man series, but instead she's just very inviting and she tells Peter to just come home, which of course he does. But when he does, and he knocks on the door, it's answered by Uncle Ben, which off the bat is crazy for obvious reasons. But for Peter in this moment, at least for right now, it's almost as if this whole reality warping, alternate reality situation, like it doesn't matter. Because as of right now, he's able to see his Uncle Ben again, who's been gone for so many years. And initially he does hug him a bit too tight and nearly breaks his ribs, which, you know, that would have been messed up. Like that would have started a whole new saga, a dark one, a very dark one. But while Peter's here, he nearly debates the idea of wanting to change anything in this world, because for one, Aunt May is the happiest that he's seen her in years, and though in his world she's put on a smile for Peter after Ben has passed, but that doesn't even compare to how happy she is here with Uncle Ben still in their life. And for a moment it really has Peter debating like, maybe I can just build from here. And of course, really just all in all, it's really just Peter getting caught up in the moment and really falling into that equal and opposite effect, to where when Uncle Ben's death caused Peter to become Spider-Man, but now that he's alive, it's having the opposite influence. And not to say that having Ben here makes Peter not want to be Spider-Man, but with having him here, it is making him second guess and third guess on doing the right thing. But while Peter's here, his spider senses go crazy, and it's because he's been found by the Hobgoblin, who at this point has used a locator spell in order to take him directly to Spider-Man. And immediately when this happens, Ben jumps in front of May to protect her, and with doing so telling the Hobgoblin like, Spider-Man, like, you got the wrong house. But of course with Peter, with protecting his aunt and uncle being his top priority, he suits up into Symbiote Spider-Man right in front of them, revealing to his aunt and uncle in this reality his true identity. But much like we talked about before, in the case of Hobgoblin, who's like, you know, the sorcerer impaired, because with him using magic and otherworld artifacts, it quickly makes him less effective in this round 2 against Spider-Man. And we see this happen immediately when he tries to bind Spider-Man in the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, to where with doing so, Spider-Man just dodges them, jumps behind the Hobgoblin, causing him to bind himself, which then leaves the Goblin open for a left hook. And you can just tell, like, prior to this point, Peter had it set in his mind, like, okay, when Hobgoblin comes back, I know he's gonna do this, this, and this, and when he comes back, I'm gonna know exactly how to counter. But even with knowing that, one of the things that Peter didn't account for is the fact that even though Hobgoblin may usually just have a set bag of tricks, but because now that there's sorcery involved, that there's still that element of the unexpected. And that's exactly what we see when Peter tries to web him up, and the Goblin just explodes his way out of there, taking out half of the house, but with doing so, killing Aunt May in the process. Which for starters is devastating with having Aunt May killed, but what makes this even worse is that Uncle Ben hates Peter for this, which makes the Uncle Ben in this reality not only hate Peter but also Spider-Man for being the cause of the direct loss of his wife, Aunt May. And I don't know about you guys, but for Peter, I'd imagine that hurt. But even still, on top of this happening, Peter also has the police to deal with. But when they arrive, someone steps in with a flashbang grenade, which causes a distraction for a short while. But it's here where we also see that he's been given a way out by Natasha Romanoff, and she lets Peter know, like, prior to this point, she was chasing down the Hobgoblin as he was tracking down Peter, but even with doing so, she got here too late. But at this point in time, there's really no time for further explanation, so she just lets Peter know that he's got to get out of there immediately. But after this, going back to the rooftop to where Doctor Strange had been waiting on Peter this whole time, because earlier when he said he had nowhere to go, like, he meant that from his soul. And I wouldn't be surprised if he cried a little bit up here, like, it's okay. But while he's up there, he's approached by an officer who wasn't really sure if he was gonna jump, I guess by the way he was dressed, but the officer more or less lets him know that he can't just be standing up there on the rooftop. But it isn't long after this where Peter shows up and he tells the officer to get out of there, and the officer, he complies. And I'm pretty sure the officer complied rather quickly because Peter used his symbiote Spider-Man voice, and not just a regular one, but you know, the one from the old cartoon.
You're in for a real shock. I'm gonna tear you limb from limb. Oh, I'm all shook up. You'll pay for this. The check's in the mail, baby. I give up. Supposed to be the good guy. You can't do this. Why not? I have the power.
And if that was the case, I figured Peter, he sounded pretty intimidated, especially if he used that checks in the mail line. But when Peter arrives here, he's very adamant about telling Doctor Strange that at this point his mind is made up. He wants to learn the mystical arts, and from here he wants Doctor Strange to teach him everything. And it's really like in this moment you have your Peter Parker that's much like the Peter Parker fresh after the death of Uncle Ben, which at the time led him to do something with his great power, taking it on as his responsibility and becoming Spider-Man. But on the flip side, in this reality where Aunt May was killed instead, who's to say that wasn't the real Aunt May? Because even though this reality is altered, it's still an augmentation of something that's very true. And it's for that reason more than any other that he has to bring Aunt May back, and do so by accepting the offer from Doctor Strange and learning the mystic arts. And so now real quick, before we go, I want to give a special shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who's new here and wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link down below to where you can head to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Symbiote Spider-Man has a lot of twists, and not even just talking about what happened so far, but there's plenty more. And that's one of the main reasons why I really hope that this continues to be an ongoing thing. And it doesn't necessarily have to just stop with the Symbiote saga, because outside of Peter's time with the symbiote, there are literally thousands of issues to cover, including your original Secret Wars. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.